Okay, I think we're live now, so let's get the party started. It's my standard entry. Just see here as the chat's loading. Yes, we've got some people already here. Diana, thank you, Diana. Simon, Gabriel, thank you for attending.
Nice.
Hello, planet Earth, and welcome to Lilia's Weekly Wednesdays. And thank you so much for joining us again today. I'm Lilia, and my pronouns are she and hers. And as the creator of Facialteam's 3,000 strong patient peer group, on Facebook, I've been an ally to the trans community now since about 2008, and I've always felt like a patient advocate. And as such, I've been keenly aware that researching anything to do with transition, gender identity, etc., is often really overwhelming for people. So that's why we've created these live streams as a beacon for us to get out information and also to highlight so many of the amazing people in the world who happen to be trans or non-binary or gender non-conforming, and give information to you, our followers. So today I'm very honored to welcome two special guests from two countries, although they happen to be in the same country today. Vivien of Transaction, she's from
Hello,
Hungary,
everyone.
and Nico, who is also the founder, co-founder of Transaction in Denmark.
Hi.
Welcome to both of you. Thank you so much. So, we usually start off here with a little bit of an introduction. But first, I'd like to let everybody know who's listening now. Please tell us in the comments below your questions, and we can try and incorporate these into our discussion today. Okay, so don't be shy. Let us know what you're thinking. And Vivien and Nico, please, can you tell us a little bit more about yourselves personally? Nico, would you like to go first?
Yeah, for sure. I can start. Yeah, so my name is Nico. I'm a non-binary queer and trans activist. I'm currently based in Copenhagen in Denmark. I've been involved in different kinds of community organizing and grassroots organizing since I was very young, and specifically in queer and trans activism for the past 10 years, mainly in Copenhagen. And as you also said, I'm one of the co-founders of Transaction. We've been starting up our work for the past 5 years, so we're a fairly new organization or young organization. And apart from all the work and activism that I do within Transaction and from Transaction, I'm also currently doing a PhD in gender studies at the University of Stavanger, and my project is about queer and trans activism in Denmark, focusing on the past 30 years.
Wow, that's a lot, Nico. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I'm really, really grateful for you taking time out of your busy schedules as activists and excellent students, etc. So, Vivien, please, can you let us know now a little bit more about yourself, your history, your pronouns, and what you're doing at Transaction?
Yes, of course. First of all, thank you for having me, Lilia. I'm Vivien. I'm a Hungarian binary trans woman, currently living, studying, and working in Denmark. I've been working with Transaction for about a year, and I'm in charge of like multiple support groups and social events that we're organizing. In my activism, I like to focus on building alliances between other European trans and queer organizations, because I believe that transnational solidarity is like a really important tool for the trans community, especially that we can use to combat some of the backlash that happens against us recently. And it is partly because I'm currently doing a master's degree in development and international relations, with a specialization in gender studies too. And in the long term, I would like to work in politics. And I'm currently working for Transaction primarily because I like to get experience working on the field with people I would like to represent in the future. And I would like to do that in the institutional system of the European Union in the future.
Thank you, Vivian. And talking about representation, I think it's so important. I, in the past, have gone to EPATH conferences and WPATH conferences, and those are for medical professionals in the trans health sector. And not so much lately, but in the beginning, say about 5 8 years ago, I was pretty surprised with the lack of professionals who actually identify as trans, non-binary, non-gender conforming. So it's great to hear that that's what you're working towards. And so thanks both for being here today. Today we're going to talk about specifically trans rights in your corresponding countries, Denmark and Hungary. But first, let's start with a little icebreaker. Um, I'd love to know from both of you, who were your favorite, let's say, or most important trans and non-binary, gender non-conforming allies in your personal lives? Would you like to go first, Nico?
Sure. I think it's a great question. It's also a difficult question. I think allyship and solidarity is quite complicated. But I can say that, like in my personal life, I have my partner, close friends, and both like people that I work with or do activism with who are great supporters. And I think like it's important when we think about solidarity and allyship that we all make mistakes. We all grew up in a society which is binary and cis and heteronormative, colonial, racist, and ableist. And so we've learned a lot of our behavior and ways of relating to other people from the system. So it's a constant work of unlearning all of this. So we all commit mistakes all the time. And so I think what's important when you are in solidarity with other people and supporting other people is that you understand this, and that we all work on limiting the damage that we do to each other, and that we are interested in listening when we are being called in or being called out by people around us, and interested in learning and take on this responsibility of learning and doing better in the future. And so for the people that I build like long-term relationships with, that is definitely the case of how we have relationships with each other. But unfortunately, it's not always what I experience from everyone who would call themselves an ally to trans communities, such as like different political actors or organizations. So there's definitely work to be done there, I think.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And recently, just this last month, there were two events in October. One was Spirit Day, which I think is mainly based in Canada and the U.S. And that's an anti-transphobic, anti-LGBTI bullying platform. And Spirit Day, you have to wear purple. So I wanted to wear purple today because I think every day should be a Spirit Day, and raising awareness about bullying against, and like you were saying, using the right terminology, being open, etc. I think Spirit Day has got the right idea in a positive manner. We need to turn this around. Um, so thank you, Nico. That's very interesting. And Vivien, how about you? Can you tell us who were your most important allies?
Yeah, well, I can really relate to what Nico has been saying with this learning process that we have to do to debunk some of the ideas that we grew up with. My partner is a non-binary person, and for me, they are my strongest ally, and we've been together like since the start of my transition, and we both kind of realized our trans identities next to each other. We were friends before, and they have been an amazing support in my life. Just we've been only dating for 2 months when they decided that they're gonna come with me to Hungary when I was coming out to my parents, which is really, really scary in Hungary, given like the attitudes that people have to trans people. And they just decided to just put themselves up to that kind of possibly dangerous situation just to support me. And yeah, they're really amazing. and we're just learning so much from each other, from my binary trans perspective to their non-binary trans perspective. I think, and it's like really amazing, and it really helps me, my activism and my work too.
Awesome, Vivien. I think that's so important to have supportive partners and family members, and it's really key. And that's why here at Facialteam, actually, November is Family Month. We're focusing on the partners, the offspring, the parents, the extended family who actually have to go through a process as well alongside their loved one who maybe is transitioning or coming to terms with non-gender conforming identity. So that's awesome. I love to hear these stories. And I would like to say also, talking about allies, that Facialteam likes to consider itself an ally to the community. And in addition to the Spirit Day, we also recently did a campaign on pronouns. So I'm really pleased today, actually, is the first time that I have someone on my live stream that identifies as non binary. So I'm really, really happy about that, to give more visibility to pronouns. And in this campaign, we've made the effort, within the company to try to work towards creating spaces where people feel comfortable revealing that their gender identity may not fall within the binary. So, and that means basically just, there's lots of different ways of doing it, like just as we have here down at the bottom of our screen, putting our pronouns, giving people a space to say what pronouns they prefer. So, thank you very much for that information. And now, secondly, I would love to know, because Facialteam does specialize in surgery, if you have ever, or if you were to come into contact with somebody who is considering any kind of surgery to transition or to feel better about their bodies, what kind of advice would you give those people?
I can start answering that. Well, it's a complicated question, but if someone in one of my support groups wanted to talk about that, first I would definitely mention that they have to really think about it and realize in themselves whether they're or they want to do the surgery to make themselves feel better about how they look, or just feel better about their bodies, or if they feel pressured by society, the pressure that society puts on trans people to adhere to gendered and beauty standards. And in case it's the first one, that they would like to do it for themselves, because that would alleviate some of their dysphoria or just make them feel better about themselves, they would feel more beautiful, then I would definitely support the idea, and I would tell them that they should go forward with it. So I think this is like the way to think about it, to differentiate our personal needs to the societal pressure.
Thank you, Vivien. I agree. I think that would be valid, sound advice. And Nico, do you have anything to add to that?
I agree that it's a complex question, and the way that we work in transaction is very much exploring with people in a very open way what it is that they need, and then support however we can in that process, including unfortunately in the case of Denmark, and I think in many countries, also helping people actually access those services, as it is not necessarily easy to gain access to trans-specific healthcare and to surgeries. And then I would also add that I really agree that it is very complex, this like separating what it is that you need for yourself to feel better, and what comes of societal pressure, because in order to or what good life or a greater life, or having some some sort of recognition in your life, also is very closely linked to norms in society, and unfortunately society is in many ways very anti-trans, and can be, or at least many aspects of society, and so it can be also very difficult to figure out a balance between what it is that you want for yourself and how to also be able to live a life in a world that is very cisnormative and binary and anti-trans, because recognition is very central, but also possibilities of alleviating the violence that can come with living as a trans person.
Absolutely. I love that word cisnormative, and I hope that it continues to trickle into the mainstream and people begin to understand that when they speak their mind, sometimes it can be quite harmful, and they don't realize, they're coming from a very binary cisnormative perspective that and also privileges. So yes, I will make sure to talk more about that in the future. So let's talk a little bit now more about the history, about what's been happening in the last few months in your respective countries, Denmark and Hungary. And Vivien, can you tell us a little bit about the latest happenings in terms of trans rights in Hungary?
Yes, well, it's been a very complicated year for trans people in Hungary. Not a lot of good things have been happening, but I think we have to go back to 2018 in June, when the government decided to pause the legal gender recognition process and the connected name change procedure. They did this as the reasoning was because of the GDPR ruling, GDPR laws in the European Union. The reasoning was that when trans people hand those papers in, the psychological evaluation that is needed in Hungary, and the claims that we are trans, then people in the authorities learn stuff about us that we shouldn't, and that's a good reasoning, but it's not. They're not doing it they haven't been doing it because of an honest reason. They just wanted trans people to not have the option for legal gender recognition. And because of that, there has been continuous campaigning from transgender and LGBT organizations ever since. And this kind of brought the community visibility and a sense of belonging together. For example, last year, about this time in Hungary, we had our first Trans Pride, an event just for trans people that was a protest and a celebration of trans identity in Hungary, and protesting for the right so we can change our legal gender and our names. And since then, there has been multiple court decisions in both the EU and Hungarian courts that said that the government has to resume the legal gender recognition process in Hungary. But the reaction to that came on actually Trans Day of Visibility this year, when the pandemic was starting and the government proposed a lockdown, while they also proposed a law that redefined what gender means in Hungarian official documents. And they define gender as the assigned sex at birth, which is unchangeable according to them. And this meant a complete ban of legal gender recognition and a non-recognition of trans people in Hungary. And as Hungary has a similar law as in Denmark, that a name law is connected to your legal gender. So without the legal gender recognition process, no trans people can also even change their names to one that fits with their gender identity. So what this means is that trans people are forced to be outed on every single occasion that they need to use an official paper. This could be voting. This could be just picking up a package from the post office. Every single time that happens in Hungary, you have to show a photo ID, which is very traumatizing for trans people and shuts them out from a lot of situations in life when they'd rather just not access certain areas in life, because it's really hard to put up with that constant fear of being outed.
It also makes them a target for violence when it's done so publicly.
Definitely, it's a very systemic issue, because this also limits access to trans-specific healthcare. there were already very pricey psychological evaluations that trans people need to do, and private blood tests, because a lot of healthcare in Hungary that's trans related can only be accessed for trans people who already changed their legal gender, which means now there's only a very few doctors who actually treat trans people who do not have this requirement. And these doctors kind of have a monopoly on providing trans people trans-specific healthcare and access to hormones and treatment, which
They have
means
a monopoly, and other providers are that maybe should be providing trans-specific healthcare can more easily deny it. Would that be correct?
yes, exactly.
Do you
And these few
think
doctors,
Do you think that the government took advantage of the pandemic in order to push back some of the legislation in Hungary?
absolutely, they chose the time to create this new law, one that hurts the most on Transgender Day of Visibility, and second because there was no way for any trans or LGBT organizations to protest because of the lockdown and due to the fear of the pandemic just starting. They definitely made this a very political choice, and a very smart in an evil way. I think just like it's very similar to what's happening in Poland now with uh, the restriction of reproductive rights, and they're doing the exact same thing, that they're limiting rights when they think people cannot protest, or the protests um, can be pushed down by police brutality. Um, so yeah, it was very well planned in Hungary. Uh, it's a far-right government in Hungary, and that's been increasingly pushing more to the right. And they always need to find more opponents, more enemies, because that's how they keep their populist agenda going. It used to be anti-migration, starting with the migration crisis in 2015. Ever since then, they've been pushing their own politics increasingly to the right, targeting first Muslim people. And there's been an anti-Semitic campaign against Brussels and George Soros in Hungary. Recently, the queer community has been the targets, including trans people. Yeah, it's a really terrible situation, but this is why I think transnational solidarity is very important, because the only people who can put pressure on this government are other EU members, because the EU has tools that they can use against Hungary, like the so-called like Article 7 procedure, and this new proposal that paying at EU funds would be tied to a sense of lawfulness, like a proper working democracy. And I think it's very important that people in other European countries understand the situation in Hungary, because we can together put pressure on this government by talking to our MEPs and calling them out for not for supporting indirectly what the Hungarian government is doing by still giving them EU funds. And
Yeah. There's lots of ways that the other EU members can show their support. Like you're saying, was very good examples, cutting off the funds for member states that are not complying with the recommendations of the Commission. Um, I'm hoping that we have some good news by the end of the day or the end of this week regarding a particular world leader who is setting a trend, and hopefully things will change. but we'll see this week. And I wanted to say also that this platform, this some people in that are watching, Yanya, I think her name was, yeah, Yanita and Vanya are saying how great it is that we're bringing attention to these issues and making good points, and transactions could work. So yeah, that's why we're doing this today, this live stream, and we hope that it creates a model for other businesses to come on board and start to raise their voices about the issues that are important to them and to their patients or clients. So thank you, Vivien. Nico, how about you? What do you think about what's been happening lately?
Well, too much. I would say, like, often with our work in transaction, and I think in most activist work, you have a sense of like too many things happening all the time that you want to respond to and to change and act in relation to. And that's, I think, very much also the case recently. But what, like, I can mention like just a couple of examples of what has been happening lately in Denmark. First of all, in relation to the pandemic, we are unfortunately seeing a lot of people who feel very isolated from their communities and who feel very lonely. Um, but fortunately, at the same time, we're also seeing that a lot of organizations like us in Transaction are also starting to organize more online based support for people in the communities. So I'm really happy to see that. That has also been a requirement from disability justice activists for so long, that much of the community work that has been happening also in the trans communities is very inaccessible, and definitely bringing the support and the communities more online makes it more accessible to some people. So that's the good side of how communities respond to the pandemic, I think. What we're also seeing is a lot of the structures of inequality, which were already in place before the pandemic, are being exacerbated or made more extreme, or to some people more visible, or some people are maybe just becoming aware. But structures such as racism and anti-Blackness, the border regimes, and anti-migrant structures and violence, homelessness, poverty, anti-gender movements, and anti-trans structures. And we're also seeing it in relation to trans-specific healthcare. So again, it's like all of this was something that was already happening and already in place before in the case of Denmark, but it is definitely becoming more extreme at the moment. So trans-specific being even more down prioritized than it was before the pandemic. A lot of people are experiencing that their appointments and their surgeries are being cancelled or postponed without even getting any explanation as to why. We're seeing that the waiting lists, which were already very long, are becoming much longer. And this is also very related to the fact that in Denmark there is a state monopoly on trans-specific healthcare. For a while, there has been only one clinic providing trans-specific healthcare in Denmark, but this monopoly was spread so that there has been two clinics operating since 2017, and now there is a new clinic which has started up this year. So now there are 3 clinics in Denmark. So those are the only 3 clinics where you can access both hormones and surgeries. And all 3 clinics are regulated by the same medical guidelines, which are very narrow and which are produced by the Danish state, by the Ministry for Health. And these guidelines require psychiatric assessment, although some of the followers of some of you who might remember that Denmark was officially the first country to depathologize or to remove the psychiatric diagnosis from the WHO diagnosis system in 2017. Unfortunately, this was not followed by a change in the practice. So the name of the diagnosis has been changed, and it has been moved out of the chapter of psychiatric illnesses, but the practice, according to guidelines and also in the clinics, is still to require psychiatric assessment before accessing trans-specific healthcare, both for hormones and for surgeries. And some
So
of
there's
the
still some gatekeeping happening
yeah,
there.
exactly. Yeah, state gatekeeping for sure. And so in relation to that, the requirement is for a psychiatrist or a psychologist to describe a person's gender history, gender identity, gender discomfort, dysphoria, and also to assess contraindications to treatment, as they're called in the guideline and in the practice in the clinics. And these are very vaguely described in the guidelines, but we know from our attempts, I would call it, at dialogue with the clinics in Denmark, and also from the counseling that we offer, and from being part of the communities, that these contraindications are interpreted in many different ways, but among various, it can be to have a body mass index above 25 or 27 for surgeries, and for some of the clinics also to access hormones. It can be that you're smoking, can be drug and alcohol use, it can be homelessness, an unstable financial situation. It can also be a variety of psychiatric diagnoses that you have either currently or have had in the past. And so in some of the clinics, being non-binary, being queer, being gay, and or in various ways gender non-conforming or not fitting like the very narrow definitions of gender and transness in the clinics can also be a barrier to access healthcare. And
So
so
there
these
are
are
a
just
lot of loopholes, which mean that providers can avoid having to provide the specific healthcare
yes.
or deny it, and also this becomes a vicious cycle too.
Mhm.
Whereas I think Vivien mentioned, if you don't have a job, how are you going to have the money to, if you don't have the gender recognition documentation, you don't have the healthcare access. It's the vicious cycle which people fall into, and it's very difficult to come out of that
Yeah,
without having the right healthcare access and gender recognition.
definitely. And there has been and continues to be so much activism in relation to improving access to trans-specific healthcare, like both in Denmark, but also, of course, worldwide. Um, and we have seen some slight improvements lately, but we've also just a month ago heard that there is possibly going to be a new process of maybe even tightening the guidelines even more. And they are at the moment blocking any participation from trans organizations in the process of writing these more specific guidelines. And the arguments that they're using are the usual ones, like a lot of us trans activists, I'm sure, are usual to hear, that it's because it's the expertise of the doctors, and that we don't have the proper medical knowledge to be a part of the process of shaping these guidelines. Um, yeah. And so in relation, maybe briefly, to legal gender recognition, we're also seeing some changes in Denmark. So in Denmark, access to legal gender recognition by self-declaration has been accessible since 2014, where the demand on sterilization was abolished. However, there are only binary options for legal gender in Denmark, and there is at the moment a 6-month consideration time before obtaining your new legal gender. And so for years, activists have also been working to remove that reflection period, as well as the lower age limit, which is at the moment of 18 years. In August, however, we heard from the Minister for Equality that there will be a new law proposal coming, where they will remove the lower age limit. So there will be no lower age limit, which is really great news, so that trans kids and youth can have access as well, and also the reflection period. But just last week, we also heard that this process is very likely to be delayed, and will probably not happen until 2022. So yeah, we will have to
And the
keep
waiting game begins.
pushing.
And the waiting game is really difficult for people who have already been waiting very, very long for their healthcare access or their legal recognition, and it can become excruciating. And as we mentioned before, they end up being forcefully outed and put in situations that are dangerous for themselves. Um,
Yeah.
so this so such important things that we're talking about today, and in relationship to what you were talking about before, Nico, the trans-specific healthcare being sort of mm, downplayed and put into a non-essential category since the pandemic. That's something that Facialteam has been very aware of and has done everything in its power to make sure that our patients coming from other countries have been able to come to Spain, and even to, we've created an advisory post with updates, protocols, so people understand that they can still come and it's safe. A travel watch, which is basically monitoring 45 different countries and all the fluctuating rules and regulations regarding international travel, and even going as far as trying to speak with the consulates, and working on the right kind of letters that the patients need in order to get those travel visas for to be considered essential medical travel. And it's working, so there's some hope, and there have been some denials, but we're behind our patients. So I just want to encourage any healthcare providers, clinics out there that are listening to this, to follow suit. We need to get behind our trans and non-binary clients who need healthcare, and we can't just leave them at the door waiting indefinitely. So
Yeah. For sure. I wanted to add maybe just a little bit more about some of
Sure.
the issues or problems that we're seeing in Denmark. And again, these are not new issues, but are definitely becoming more severe at the moment. So what we're also seeing in Denmark is that a lot of people who are seeking asylum in Denmark on the basis of gender identity and or trans status are having their claims rejected because of, again, very narrow definitions of what a trans person is and how you like this idea that you have to prove that you're trans, right? And like, so the frames for how you are trans and then how you prove that you are trans are very narrow, and so a lot of people are being rejected. And beyond that, like the horrible conditions in the asylum camps, which are often unsafe for many trans people. Yeah, including the treatment from the employees in the camps, and the forceful housing continuing if you obtain asylum status, isolates a lot of trans people in small towns throughout Denmark. And so and also in relation to the pandemic and the general situation, we're seeing a very big number of queer and trans people who are experiencing homelessness. And unfortunately, we're also seeing that a lot of the services for people who experience homelessness are very anti-trans and or do not welcome or open up their space for queer and trans people. And we have also started working a little bit more on and receiving reports on very poor treatment of trans and intersex people who are incarcerated in prisons in Denmark, who are being held in a facility not corresponding to their gender, and who are experiencing severe harassment both from staff and from other incarcerated people who are not having access to hormones and other medical treatment that is necessary for them.
Well, thank you for that, Nico. I was just having a look at the comments here, Oh yes, pardon me. And Yanni's pronouns are they and them. Thank you, Line, for that. Or Robin. And let's see here. We have a comment. The 6-month reflection period was horrible. Talking about the people having to wait 6 months in Denmark in order to get their legal recognition, right? So it's good that that's been changed. Although they've announced, you said that it may not actually be instated until next year, or
2 years
two
from now.
2 years from now. So
Yeah.
it's still a long wait. So thank you everybody for your comments. And I also wanted to go back, Nico, to something you mentioned about healthcare providers who don't consider that they're prepared or for to provide this kind of service. And um, is happening in a lot of places around the world, unfortunately. And I would just like also to give a little ray of light onto that subject, in that the WPATH, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, is working on its 8th edition of the Standards of Care, which is the basically the best practices guide for healthcare professionals in the trans sector around the world. And some of the members of Facialteam are on the surgical work group, advising on that specific section. And they're in contact, and there's definitely a lot of discussion about informed consent, which means that the it's not, it is specialized, but it's not that specialized. It's a there trans patients need the same kind of care for hormones. So an endocrinologist, it's their hormones. It requires the same kind of protocols as any other patient. And so yeah, it's about making sure that professionals are given a little nod, saying, okay, this is just part of what you do already, and it's not a big deal. So it's not an excuse anymore to say, I don't know about that. So let's see, we've been going here for about 45 minutes already. It's gone by so fast. So we mentioned we were going to talk about in the International Pronouns Day, but we kind of already mentioned that before. Now at the beginning, we touched on the importance of pronouns. So, and since we've talked now about things that have been happening in the past, in recent months, and now I'd like for you both to talk a little bit about things that are happening now and in the future, projects specifically about transaction and what you're doing. So, Nico, would you like to share with us a little bit more on that topic?
Yeah, I can start briefly, and then Vivien, you can fill in or expand maybe. Yeah, well, so Transaction is an organization which is based in Denmark, and as I said, we're a fairly young organization. We are an organization for and by trans people. We work with a depathologizing, a de-victimizing, a non-critical and intersectional approach, and also with a very broad and inclusive definition of trans. We very strongly believe in the importance of trans-led initiatives for trans people, which is unfortunately not always the case. So we really work a lot to ensure creating a space for organizations like us and for ourselves also. Then we actively work to ensure representation and prioritization of the people in our communities who are most marginalized. And both in the support work and, well, I would say we work with this in all aspects of the organization and of our work. And it's a continuous work. And we are definitely not there, but we are actively working on it, yeah. We are very committed to creating social justice for trans people and to building and strengthening and lifting up our communities. And we do so in many different ways. We do it by offering individual counseling, support groups, different kinds of social platforms, and community building events and workshops. through a new youth project, and also through different separatist events. So for instance, support groups which are for and by trans people who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and also an upcoming group for seropositive or trans people who live with HIV. And then we have some more initiatives in the pipeline, including in relation to homelessness and neurodiversity, and also functional diversity. Then we also do a lot of different work in relation to strengthening collaborations and coalition building and solidarity with other social justice struggles and oppressed communities. And we are involved in a variety of different kinds of activism and advocacy work. Some of it is, for instance, related to the activism that I was talking about earlier in relation to access to trans-specific healthcare. So that could be sitting in on dialogue meetings with the gender identity clinics, or with the health authorities or the health ministry, pushing the governments and also the clinics to change their approach or to change the medical guidelines. But that is just one area. There are many different ways that we do advocacy work and activism. And also, I would like, to like also maybe state that we don't like have a very narrow definition of what activism is. I think in this very binary and cis-normative world, like just existing and continuing to exist and to insist on our existence as trans people is definitely also activism. And I think most trans people are involved in some kind of activism in their everyday lives in that sense, and also in like when we educate people around, also when we correct people around us, that is also activism.
Absolutely. Absolutely, I agree. That's important. And just being. So Nico, I wanted to ask, transaction, is it comprised of all volunteers, or are there employees?
It's a mix. We have like since we started working, we have been working a lot to secure funding for our work, because unfortunately, a lot of trans people, we are often asked to do unpaid work, work that people who are not trans would otherwise be paid to do. We are asked to do for free. So for us, it's very important to insist that trans people should be paid for our work. And so we have worked a lot to secure funding, and it's a continuous struggle for trans-led organizations, not only for Trans Action, but for organizations and groups around the world, to secure funding for our work. So yeah, we have some funding, which can then fortunately pay a little bit of salary to some people. So we have a group of employees, I think at the moment around 7, 8 people, and a bunch of people who are loosely connected. None of us work full time. It's a few hours a week mostly, because of the limited funding. And then we have a growing group of activists, or like on-off number of activists, depending on the energy that people have to put into the work. And I would say like everyone who's involved in Trans Action also do activism and unpaid work, besides like doing some paid work maybe. Then we have a board as well. Yeah, so it's
Yeah,
both.
it's a struggle, a constant struggle to secure funding and maintain a volunteer crew, because people do get burnt out, don't they? And even if you do have some employees, it's not a full-time position. So I imagine you have a turnover because people find jobs, or, have to find other ways to pay the bills, and are not able to do this anymore. So.
Yeah.
And how is TGEU helping the Transgender Europe? I understand they organize a big event every year, and it's happening this Saturday, first ever virtual version, right? Are you
Mm.
both attending?
Yes, probably. It's the General Assembly for TGU Transgender Europe. We are a member organization. It's a great tool to be a member of TGU, to network and collaborate between countries in transgender activism. it's also, I find it very useful when I was working in an international counseling case. Just finding members, other member organizations in different countries that we can connect to and ask for their help or ask for their advice on certain things. This specific case I cannot say a lot about, but it was a deportation case within the EU, and we worked with other partner organizations in the country where this person would have been deported to, and we managed to secure like an option for them if they would have been deported. But we also wrote an expert opinion to the court describing how dangerous would it be for this person to leave Denmark and to go back to that Eastern European country where they have like very small amount of connections to. And yeah, that actually worked out really well. They could stay in Denmark, and it's one of the most rewarding experiences I had in Transaction, working with that case and helping this person secure a safer life in Denmark. So I would advise anyone who is looking for help in different countries when it comes to trans activism or just help between queer people to look at the member list of TGEU. And you can find organizations with the similar mindsets because, well, it's an umbrella organization and we both have similar goals. We all have similar goals.
Exactly. So, Vivien, can you tell me a little bit more about what your role is in Transaction specifically?
Yes, my main role is creating events. I'm an event manager, project officer. I'm running 2 support groups now with my colleague Fernanda. Our goal has been this year to expand a little bit from the capital region because there's a lot of queer events happening in Copenhagen, but not so much in other smaller cities. And so our support groups that we started recently focus on Aalborg and Aarhus, so the mainland area of Denmark, Jutland. And I'm also organizing a bi-weekly virtual hangout. It's on Wednesdays. And it's supposed to alleviate some of the loneliness that trans people face during the pandemic because our physical spaces have become very limited. And it's actually one of our goals at Transaction to keep this community safe during the pandemic. We are a very small and interconnected community. So if one of us gets infected, then they probably have other trans friends who are at risk too by getting infected, and that's why we're doing a lot of events, and the support groups are also online, so we can reach out to a broader audience and people who are in danger because of the pandemic. Recently, we also started a big youth project that's supported by Tuborg in Denmark. It's a project for trans youth aged between 15 and 30. And this consists of 2 support groups, one between the ages of 15 and 19, and one between 20 and 30 for trans people. And it also consists of several social events that, well, it's really hard to organize them right now because of the pandemic, but they're definitely coming, and we'd like to involve as many trans people as possible. We had a really big opening planned that we had to postpone for some time, but it's going to be one of those big fancy events with red carpet, and I think a lot of trans people is going to look forward to that. And recently, we started our own talk show in Transaction, T4T, T for trans people, and we can actually share the last episode at the end of the stream, a link to it. Our coworkers were talking about relationships and how it works between trans people and for trans people. I think it's a very nice initiative, and you should check it out for sure.
Absolutely. I'll put the link down. It's the link to Facebook. Shall I share that in the comments now? No, T4T. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
Facebook link here. Okay, I'll share the link. I think any content like this is amazing. You know, it's really bringing the conversation to light here. So I've just put the link down there in the comments for anybody who's listening now. You click on that, it'll take you to Facebook where they're talking about the talk show. I'd be happy for us to talk more about that and have the talk show members come on here and we can talk a little bit more about that as an initiative that you're working on. So it sounds like you have so many projects, so many services. I'm really blown away. I don't know how you do it with 7 people on a few hours of a week. And but I think that the situation as this kind of organization is in the same situation around the world, isn't it? It's always a struggle, and in the just over a decade that I've been working with the trans community, I've seen people go from, not really being connected, not really know what's happening, feeling really isolated. And we talk about isolation now, but it's nothing like the isolation that trans people had 15 years ago, and when these groups online just didn't even exist. Now it's harder to meet physically, yes, but there's a lot more connection now, and I'm really pleased to have seen that grow over the years. So I commend you for all the amazing work you're doing at Transaction for the community. It's definitely essential. It's essential. So we're going to round up here because we've been going for an hour. The takeaway messages that you have for the people who come back and listen to this video, and which will be saved here on our channel once we finish the live stream. What would you like for people to remember from today's discussion? And Nico, would you like to go first?
Actually, I think Vivien should go first.
Oh, okay. Well, at the beginning of the stream, I rambled a long time about the precarious situation trans people have in Denmark. In Hungary, sorry. It's not easy in Denmark either, but Hungary is a different situation. And a country like Hungary might seem like small and inconsequential when you're not Hungarian, but Hungary is a really good indicator in how the far right and the global anti-gender movements is planning to do away with trans rights. And I think it's incredibly important that we know about it and we learn from the tactics that they use against us, and that we organize together in an international way, because that's how we are the strongest. So you should keep an eye on the news and just support your fellow trans people, whether they're in your country or in another.
And vote.
Yes, always go vote. But voting's never enough, so organize between yourselves and do direct action.
Absolutely. And now, Nico, do you have something to add to Vivien on the takeaway message?
Not so much. That's why I wanted you to go first, Vivien, because I wanted to just chime in and say I really agree that solidarity, both between trans communities across borders, but also within trans communities, there are a lot of different trans positions and experiences and levels of privilege and access. And I think strengthening that understanding and solidarity within our communities as well is very important. And then more online organizing. It's really great to see in these times how much it has become accessible online. And so I can only encourage people to, if you're not already connected, and if you're missing support or community in your life, to get out there on the World Wide Web and find different kinds of trans communities that are ever more accessible today. And reach out to us in Transaction if you have any questions, or if you want to join some of what we're doing, check out T4T as well, for sure.
We have some comments here now from Anita that this was very informative. Everybody's making some nice comments saying that they're really pleased that we're having this discussion on trans issues, that we should all support each other, stay alert to the dangers, and support organizations such as Transaction that are really making a difference. So I've put the links down here in the comments, Instagram, Facebook, and the email for Transaction for anybody who wants to get in touch. Please do. I understand that even though you're based in Denmark and you're mainly focused on the community in Denmark, that you sometimes get contacted by people outside of the country, right?
Yes, it does happen, and we're trying to help as much as we can, or at least try to connect you with some of our contacts who can help you in your specific country, if you know some people there.
Thank you so much, Vivien, for your contribution today.
Thank you
Thank you
for
so
having
much,
me.
Nico. And congratulations on and making and continuing the initiative that you started with Transaction. You said 5 years ago, right? So congratulations on that.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting us.
It's my pleasure. So here we are, viewers. Remember, your input and your lobbying are important. Please keep talking to us and let us know what topics you'd like us to cover on these live streams. More importantly, if you're an ally or a trans health professional or a professional thinking about getting into the LGBTIQ plus community, your help is direly needed. So please show your support and send messages to your GPs, to your MPs, tweet the powers that be, and do whatever you can to help organizations like Transaction to continue their work so that basic human rights like healthcare access are respected. Please stay tuned for upcoming lives next week. We don't have a live, we just have a replay, but it will be very interesting. And then on the 18th, we do have a live stream with Dr. William Powers, who is a very popular family doctor in the US and has become particularly famous for his ideas on hormone treatment for trans people. So we'll be talking live with him for the second time in 2 weeks' time. Thanks again, everybody. Join our patient group on Facebook, and the links are here in the comments below too. Please sign up for our newsletter to keep up to date with our upcoming lives and other news. Follow this channel, please. Follow, like, share right now, right there. There's the button. Follow. Stay safe, everybody. Keep well, and please remember, healthcare matters, and your happiness matters. Thank you very much, Transaction, Nico, and Vivien. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thanks for watching.
Yeah, bye. Thank you.